My world used to be very small, but it was sturdy. It was built on a foundation of sacrifice. I see that now, but at the time, I just called it love. After Dad died, I was the one who stayed. My younger sister, Clara, was the brilliant, fragile one, the one who needed protecting. My mother, a woman hollowed out by grief, needed a pillar to lean on. I became that pillar. I was 19 when I dropped out of art school. I had a good hand, a good eye for color and form, but you can't frame a drawing to pay a mortgage. So I took a job as an administrator at a logistics firm. The hours were long. The work was a grayscale of spreadsheets and invoices, but the pay was steady. It kept the lights on in our little house. It paid for Clara's tutors, her ballet lessons, her art supplies, all the things I'd packed away in a dusty box in the attic. My life became a rhythm of quiet service. I'd wake up before dawn, make breakfast for everyone, pack Clara's lunch, make sure Mom took her medication. I'd go to work, stare at numbers until my eyes blurred, come home, make dinner, help Clara with her homework, listen to my mother's litany of worries, and then fall into bed, too tired to even dream. On weekends, I did the grocery shopping, the cleaning, the laundry. My hands, which once held charcoal and paintbrushes, were now rough from dish soap and bleach. I didn't mind. Truly. Watching Clara blossom was my reward. She was the artist the family was meant to have. Her laughter was the color in my monochrome world. When she met Mark, a handsome young lawyer from a wealthy family, we were all swept up in the romance. He adored her, and his family, though a bit stiff, seemed to welcome her with open arms. The wedding planning took over our lives. It was a whirlwind of cake tastings, dress fittings, and floral arrangements. I paid for the deposit on the venue with my meager savings. I spent my evenings hand-addressing hundreds of invitations with the calligraphy skills I'd learned in a class I took long ago, a ghost of my former life. I helped Clara choose her dress, a magnificent creation of silk and lace, and I held back tears when she stepped out of the dressing room, looking like a princess. For myself, I found a simple, elegant navy dress on a clearance rack. It didn't matter what I wore. The day wasn't about me. It was about her. The morning of the wedding was chaos and joy. I was the one who steamed Clara's veil, who found our mother's lost earring, who calmed Clara's nerves with a cup of chamomile tea. As I pinned a small, white rose into her hair, she looked at my reflection in the mirror. "Thank you, Alara," she whispered. "For everything. I wouldn't be here without you." My heart swelled with so much love it felt like it might burst. That single moment, I thought, made every sacrifice worthwhile. The church was breathtaking, filled with white lilies and the soft glow of candlelight. The air hummed with anticipation. I took my seat in the second row, my designated spot. I wasn't a bridesmaid. Clara's new, sophisticated friends had taken those roles. I was just family, just the sister, the pillar. As the organ music swelled, I felt a profound sense of peace. My job was done. She was safe, she was happy. I had fulfilled my promise to our father. The ceremony began. Father Michael, a man who had known us since we were children, stood at the altar. He smiled benevolently at the congregation. Then his eyes found me. His smile tightened. The music softened. He cleared his throat. "Before we proceed," he said, his voice amplified by the microphone, echoing through the cavernous space, "there is a small matter to address. A message from the bride's mother, to be read for the sake of clarity and peace on this joyous day." A confused murmur rippled through the guests. I saw my mother in the front row, staring straight ahead, her face a mask of grim determination. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. Father Michael's eyes locked onto mine again. "Alara," he said, and my name sounded like an accusation. "Nobody invited you here." The world stopped. The air crackled with a sudden, sharp silence. Every head in the church turned towards me. I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, like tiny, hot needles. My face flushed with a heat so intense I thought I might faint. I could see Clara's back, her shoulders rigid in her perfect dress. She didn't turn around. "Your presence," the priest continued, his voice devoid of any warmth, "is a source of great distress to your mother and a potential shadow over this sacred union." He then unfolded a piece of familiar, cream-colored stationery. My mother's handwriting. He began to read. The letter was a venomous masterpiece. It spoke of my jealousy, my resentment of Clara's happiness. It painted me as a manipulative, joyless burden who had spent years holding my sacrifices over their heads. It claimed I had tried to sabotage the wedding preparations and that my negative energy was unwelcome. Every word was a lie, a grotesque twisting of my love and dedication into something ugly and monstrous. The public humiliation was absolute. I was being excommunicated from my own family in front of everyone we had ever known. I looked for an ally, a friendly face, but all I saw were expressions of shock, pity, and a sort of morbid curiosity. My sister didn't move a muscle. My mother's jaw was set like stone. They were letting this happen. They had planned this. I stood up, my legs trembling so badly I wasn't sure they would hold me. The walk down that aisle was the longest journey of my life. The sound of my own footsteps on the cold stone floor was deafening. I didn't run. I walked with a deliberate slowness, my head held high, even as tears streamed down my face, blurring the faces of the people I had called my friends and neighbors. The heavy oak door of the church closed behind me with a final, echoing thud, sealing me out of the world I had built. I stood on the steps, the bright afternoon sun feeling like an insult. The sounds of the organ starting up again, a cheerful, triumphant melody, drifted through the door. My life's work, my entire identity, had been erased in a matter of minutes.
Naquele momento, meu chão desapareceu. Foi a dor mais profunda que já senti. Se você já passou por uma grande decepção e entende o que é ter o coração partido, por favor, curta este vídeo para eu saber que não estou sozinha nessa jornada.
The days that followed are a blur of gray. I couldn't go back to the house, of course. My key no longer worked. My clothes, my books, my few personal belongings had been packed into 2 black trash bags and left on the porch, as if I were nothing more than garbage to be collected. I stayed on the couch of a kind friend from work, a woman who asked no questions and simply offered me endless cups of tea and a safe place to weep. But I couldn't stay there forever. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Every time the phone rang, I would jump, my heart pounding with a toxic mix of hope and terror. But it was never them. My mother and sister had simply excised me, like a tumor. I lost my job. I couldn't face the sympathetic, pitying looks in the office. I couldn't concentrate on spreadsheets when my own life's ledger was so catastrophically unbalanced. I just stopped showing up, and eventually, a termination letter arrived in the mail. My savings, already depleted by the wedding, dwindled with alarming speed. I moved from my friend's couch to a tiny, damp basement apartment that smelled of mildew and defeat. Survival became a brutal, daily calculus. I ate instant noodles and stale bread. I sold the few pieces of jewelry I owned, including a delicate gold locket my father had given me. I spent my days walking aimlessly through the city, invisible in the crowds, a ghost haunting the edges of other people's happy lives. I was hollowed out. The woman who had been a pillar was now just a pile of rubble. The love that had defined me had become the poison that was killing me from the inside out. I felt worthless because they had told me I was. I felt unlovable because they had thrown my love away. This was the bottom of the well, a place so dark and cold, I was certain I would die there. One afternoon, weeks into this miserable existence, I received a certified letter. It was from a lawyer. The family home was being sold, and I was required to retrieve any remaining personal items from the attic by the end of the week, or they would be disposed of. The thought of going back there made me physically ill, but the thought of my father's things being thrown in a dumpster was worse. I went at night, using the key I still had for the back door, hoping to avoid any confrontation. The house was empty, sterile. White sheets covered the furniture, and the air was thick with the silence of abandonment. It was no longer a home. It was a tomb of memories. In the attic, under the dust and the cobwebs, I found my old box of art supplies, a painful reminder of a path not taken. And next to it, another box I didn't recognize. A heavy, dark cedar chest with my grandmother's initials, AV, carved into the lid. My grandmother Annalise had died when I was very young, but I had vivid, sensory memories of her. The soft, wrinkled skin of her hands, the scent of lavender, and something spicy that always clung to her clothes. My mother rarely spoke of her. Opening the chest was like opening a door to the past. The air filled with a faint, complex fragrance, a ghost of a perfume. Inside, nestled in faded velvet lining, were not just old photographs and letters, but a collection of small, amber-colored glass vials, each with a handwritten label. Summer rain on hot asphalt. First frost on a rose. Old books in a quiet room. Beneath them were several leather-bound journals, filled with my grandmother's elegant, looping script. I sat there, on the dusty floorboards of that empty house, and began to read. It was a revelation. My grandmother, whom I'd only known as a kind, quiet woman, had been a perfumer. Not a professional one, but a passionate, self-taught artist of scent. Her journals were filled with more than just formulas. They were filled with stories. She didn't just mix oils. She distilled memories. She wrote about how the scent of vetiver reminded her of her husband's return from the war, how a blend of citrus and mint captured the joy of her first child's laughter. She believed that scent was the most direct path to memory, the key that could unlock forgotten emotions and lost moments. She was a storyteller, but her medium wasn't words or paint. It was fragrance. Tucked into the final pages of her last journal was a letter addressed to me. For my Alara, it began. If you are reading this, then you have found your way back to the part of our family that remembers. Your mother has a difficult heart, my child. She mistakes strength for hardness. But you have my soul. You feel everything. Do not let the world crush that out of you. Use it. Create beauty from your pain. This is your inheritance. Not money or property, but the knowledge that you can take the intangible, a memory, a feeling, a dream, and give it form. In that cold, silent attic, holding my grandmother's legacy in my hands, a tiny, fragile flame flickered to life in the darkness of my soul. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was something far smaller, far more delicate. It was curiosity. It was a connection. It was a whisper from the past, telling me that my sensitivity, the very thing my mother had weaponized against me, might not be a weakness after all. That cedar chest became my entire world. I took it back to my grim little apartment, and it was like I had brought a shard of sunlight into the damp. I spent every waking moment devouring my grandmother's journals, cross-referencing her beautiful, poetic descriptions with cheap, second-hand chemistry books I bought online. I learned about top notes, heart notes, and base notes. I learned about tinctures, distillations, and absolutes. My tiny kitchen became a chaotic laboratory. It was filled with mason jars of herbs steeping in alcohol, small beakers, and droppers. The air was a constant, evolving cloud of scents, sometimes beautiful, sometimes truly awful. I made so many mistakes. I created concoctions that smelled like swamp water, like burnt sugar, like chemical cleaner. I wasted precious, expensive oils. More than once, I broke down in tears of sheer frustration, surrounded by my fragrant failures. But I never stopped. For the first time since I was a teenager, I was creating something. I was working with my hands again, not to serve others, but to build something from nothing. I started with the simplest formula in her book, sun-drenched linen. A clean, comforting blend of lavender, chamomile, and a touch of white musk. My grandmother wrote that she created it to bottle the feeling of safety and peace. The first time I successfully recreated it, the scent filled my apartment, and for the first time in months, I felt a moment of genuine calm. I wasn't just mixing ingredients. I was connecting with her, with the part of my lineage that valued art and emotion. I funneled the last of my money into buying a small batch of high-quality oils and dozens of little atomizer bottles. I designed simple, elegant labels on my old laptop and printed them at the local library. I called my nascent brand Apothecary of Memory. With a folding table and a tablecloth, I set up a tiny stall at a weekend farmer's market, nestled between a woman selling artisanal jams and a man selling organic dog treats. It was terrifying. Most people walked right by, their eyes glazing over my humble display. For hours, I stood there, my smile feeling more and more like a grimace. Then, an older woman with kind, sad eyes stopped. She picked up the tester for sun-drenched linen. She sprayed a little on her wrist, closed her eyes, and inhaled. And then she began to cry. Not loud, dramatic sobs, but silent, heartfelt tears that streamed down her face. "Oh my," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. This smells exactly like my mother's laundry room. She passed away last year. I'd forgotten what it felt like to be in her home. She bought 3 bottles. She held my hand, her eyes still wet, and thanked me. "You haven't just sold me a perfume," she said. "You've given me back a piece of my mother." That was it. That was the moment everything changed. The $20 she gave me was important, yes, but it was the look in her eye, the raw, human connection we shared, that relit my soul. My purpose, which had been so brutally ripped away from me, began to reform. I wasn't just a caregiver for my family anymore. I could be a caregiver for people's memories. That one woman told her friends. The next weekend, a few people came to my stall specifically looking for me. A young man asked if I could create a scent that captured the smell of the pine forest where he and his father used to camp. A woman wanted a perfume that smelled like the salted air and plumeria of her honeymoon in Hawaii. I began taking on bespoke projects, sitting with my clients, listening to their stories, and translating their emotions into scent. My little stall became a place of pilgrimage for the nostalgic and the heartbroken. My reputation grew by word of mouth, slowly at first, then with gathering speed. A local lifestyle blogger wrote a piece about the memory weaver of the farmer's market. The article went viral in our city. Suddenly, my email inbox was flooded with orders and requests for custom blends. The demand became too much for my tiny kitchen. I took out a small business loan, my hands shaking as I signed the papers, and rented a small, light-filled studio space. I built a website. I learned about marketing and shipping logistics. I was no longer a victim hiding in a basement. I was a business owner, an artisan, an alchemist of memory. I was working harder than I ever had in my life, but this exhaustion was different. It was fulfilling. It was mine.
Foi ali, com as minhas próprias mãos, que comecei a reescrever a minha história. Deixei de ser a vítima e me tornei a autora do meu destino. Se a minha jornada de superação está te inspirando, inscreva-se no canal para acompanhar os próximos capítulos e fazer parte desta comunidade de recomeços.
2 years passed. 2 years of relentless work, creativity, and healing. The Apothecary of Memory was no longer a market stall. It was a beautiful, thriving boutique in a quaint, historic part of the city. The shop was my sanctuary, filled with dark wood, antique apothecary jars, and the gentle, mingling scents of my creations. I had 2 employees who helped me manage the online store and the front of the house. I had been featured in national magazines. My story, once a source of unbearable shame, was now the powerful narrative behind my brand. I had found not just success, but a deep, abiding peace. I rarely thought of my mother and sister anymore. The wound was still there, a pale, silvery scar on my soul, but it no longer ached. I had learned to live without them. I had built a new family, a community of clients and friends who valued me for who I was, not for what I could do for them. Then one Tuesday afternoon, the little bell above the shop door chimed. I looked up from the letter I was writing, and my breath caught in my throat. It was Clara. She stood hesitatingly just inside the doorway, looking small and lost in the warm, fragrant air of the shop. She was no longer the radiant bride. She was thinner, and there were dark circles under her eyes. Her expensive clothes seemed to hang off her, as if they belonged to someone else. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and trepidation. "Alara," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I didn't smile. I didn't rush to greet her. I simply stood my ground behind the polished wooden counter, my territory. "Clara," I said, my voice even and calm. It was a voice she had never heard from me before. It was not the voice of the caregiver or the victim. It was the voice of the woman who owned the shop. "Your store, it's beautiful," she stammered, looking around at the bottles that held 1,000 stories, none of them hers. "What are you doing here?" I asked. The question was not unkind, but it was direct. There was no room for small talk between us. Tears welled in her eyes. I saw an article about you. About this place. I had to see it. I had to see you." She took a tentative step forward. "Mark and I were separated. It's over. He wasn't who I thought he was. And Mother." She shook her head, a bitter little smile playing on her lips. "She's just the same. When Mark's money started to dry up, so did her affection." I listened, my face impassive. I felt a distant pang of pity for her, but it was muted, like a sound heard from very far away. Her pain was no longer my responsibility. "I'm so sorry, Alara." She finally choked out, the words I once thought I would die if I didn't hear. I was a coward. I let Mother poison me. She told me you were trying to ruin my life, that you were jealous. She twisted everything. The letter. I only saw parts of it. She convinced me it was for my own good, to protect my new life from you. I let the silence hang in the air after her confession. The old me would have rushed to comfort her, to say it's okay, to absolve her of her guilt. But the old me was gone. You weren't a child, Clara, I said, my voice soft but firm. You were a woman making a choice. You chose to believe her. You chose to stand there in silence while my entire world was burned to the ground. The truth of the words, spoken without anger, was more powerful than any shouting match could have been. She flinched as if struck. I know, she whispered, tears now flowing freely. And I have to live with that. I wanted to tell you. I was wrong. And I am so proud of you. Look at what you've built. She gestured around the shop. You took the worst day of your life and you made something beautiful out of it. I took a deep breath, the scent of sandalwood and rose from a nearby diffuser filling my lungs, grounding me. I didn't do it because of that day, Clara. I did it in spite of that day. I built this from what was good in our family, not from what was broken. I built it on grandmother Annalise's legacy. The letter you and Mom used to banish me was just paper. But the letters my grandmother left me, they were a foundation. You chose your legacy. I built mine. I came out from behind the counter and stood before her. I didn't hug her. I didn't offer false promises of a future that could never be. I forgive you, I said, and the words felt true as I spoke them. Not for you, but for me. I can't carry that bitterness anymore. It doesn't have a place here. I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes, the hope that we could go back. I had to extinguish it, for both our sakes. I wish you peace, Clara. I hope you find your own way to build something new. But my path is here. And it's a path I have to walk on my own. She nodded, a look of profound sadness and understanding on her face. She bought a small bottle of summer rain on hot asphalt before she left. She said it reminded her of playing in the street as a child, before everything had become so complicated. After she was gone, I stood in the center of my shop, my sanctuary, my world, and I felt a final, quiet click inside me. The last piece of the puzzle falling into place. The final chain breaking. My peace was not dependent on her apology or her return. My peace was something I had crafted myself with my own 2 hands, one drop at a time.